Hello everyone and welcome to my ultimate tank guide for the Elder Scrolls Online. It's been a while since I fully updated this tank guide. I've been very busy completing pretty much all of the content in ESO as a tank, and I wanted now to try and teach you everything that I know about ESO tanking. The written guide can be viewed over on my website. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below, and for a faster response you can join us on the Tank Club Discord. The best way to utilise this guide is by also using my beginner tank build alongside it, as they complement each other really well. In this comprehensive guide we'll cover everything you need to know to become an effective tank in the Elder Scrolls Online. We'll start with the basics and gradually move on to advanced strategies, ensuring that you have the knowledge to excel at tanking in ESO. The Elder Scrolls Online offers a unique tanking experience compared to many other MMORPGs. The game's active combat system requires tanks to maintain aggro, understand and manage mechanics, sustain resources, and survive through various challenges. In addition, tanks are often expected to buff their group, debuff enemies, and support damage dealers, making them an integral part of any team. In veteran and hard mode content, tanks play a crucial role in ensuring the group's success, and the responsibilities can be demanding. While some may think that tanking is an easier role, it quickly becomes clear that it's one of the most challenging roles in the game. The pressure on tanks can be immense, as their performance directly impacts the group's survival and success. This guide will help you understand the fundamentals of tanking in ESO. While we won't be able to cover every mechanic for all dungeons, trials and arenas, this guide will provide you with the knowledge and confidence to enter as a tank and perform your role effectively. So let's get started. So what is an ESO tank? In the Elder Scrolls Online, a tank is the backbone of any group, the heavily armoured frontline warrior who protects and defends allies from enemy threats. The primary role of a tank is to aggro and control enemy targets, forcing them to attack you and minimising the damage dealt to damage dealers and healers. The key responsibilities of a tank are aggro management. The first job is to gain attention of enemies, keeping their focus onto you. You've then got positioning. You've got to safely position enemies to protect your allies and allow them to perform their roles effectively. You've then got mechanics, and you've got to learn to understand and efficiently handle fight mechanics and tactics, as you will often deal with them more than any other role. And then you've got survivability. You've got to prioritise your health and your resistances and building up your character to be able to withstand heavy damage, ensuring that you can endure sustained attacks. Some of the big challenges of tanking include sustain. Balancing that magic recovery and stamina gain is crucial. Blocking depletes stamina, which cannot be regenerated while blocking, making stamina management an essential part of tanking. You've then also got survivability, and good sustain allows for self-healing. Experience and knowledge of your class, race, role and specific fights are vital for survival. As you become more advanced at tanking, heightened responsibilities include support and buffing. Once you master the basics, you will support your group by providing buffs and using gear sets that enhance your group's damage, survivability and sustain. You'll also be in charge of debuffing enemies by applying debuffs to enemies to increase the damage that they take, which is easier for tanks as they always are at the very front on the front line right next to the boss. And all of this is really important because it creates that efficiency. The quicker that your group can defeat enemies, the better it is for everybody, especially for tanks, because you have to manage sustain and fight mechanics. So the shorter period of time you can do that, the better it is. Mastering these elements is crucial for an effective ESO tank, making you an invaluable asset for any group. Now we're going to look at the tank classes, and choosing the right tank class in the Elder Scrolls Online largely depends on which class offers the most benefits to the group. The effectiveness of a tank is not solely about their ability to withstand damage, but also about the unique buffs and debuffs that they bring to enhance the group's overall performance. Some of the key considerations are the group benefits. The most valuable tank classes provide significant buffs and debuffs that benefit both the tank and the group. You've also got ease of play. Some classes are just generally more beginner friendly, making them a better choice for new tanks. With the class options, you've got base game classes, which are the Dragon Knight, Nightblade, Sorcerer and Templar, with additional options that you can purchase with the Warden, the Necromancer and the Arcanist, and these can be bought in the Crown Store. Each class has unique strengths with significant differences in buffs, debuffs and group benefits that they offer. While every class is capable of tanking, some excel more than others and provide additional perks that can make them more desirable for specific scenarios, and this will frequently change as well as there are updates and patches and changes to the combat systems. So with that in mind, if we were considering a beginner tank, my number one class for a beginner tank would be the Dragon Knight. Dragon Knight tanks are perfect for new players and new tanks in the Elder Scrolls Online. This class offers a comprehensive set of skills and passives that ensure excellent sustain and survival capabilities. Dragon Knights excel in dungeon content and remain popular as main tanks in trial content. The main reasons for playing a Dragon Knight include their user friendliness, and they have all of the necessary tools for tanking. They've also got excellent sustain with strong magicka and stamina management. They've got really strong survival with powerful self-healing, shields, defensive capabilities and ultimates, and they're very versatile. They're both effective in dungeons, trials and arenas. While the Dragon Knight is a standout choice, the Arcanist tank also offers immense strength and group benefits, though it requires an additional purchase. Starting with the Dragon Knight provides a solid foundation for ESO tanking. Next we've got the Arcanist, and the Arcanist is the newest class in the Elder Scrolls Online, and it's known for its exceptional strength and versatility. So why choose an Arcanist? It easily reaches the resistance cap with minimal effort, so it's really good for survival. They can also stack huge amounts of regen, which means they can sustain much more easily and be able to cast their skills much more often. They also offer numerous buffs and debuffs, providing more utility and group benefits than any other class in the game. Some of their skills and buffs are equivalent to 5-piece gear sets, and their skills have really long durations, meaning they don't have to be cast as often, so it's much easier to play them because they've got long cooldowns. Some key features of the Arcanist include the Crux system. Skills are categorized into Crux earners and spenders. You use Crux earners to build Crux, which then buffs Crux spender skills. A key feature as well is also the healing. They are quite different to most other classes. They rely on large damage shields and an automatic heal that requires meeting a certain threshold for it to activate, so they're very different. And then their suitability. For dungeons, they excel in that content due to their extended benefits from their skills and passives. They are the number one class for dungeon content, especially if you're trying to optimize your group. In trial content, they're highly effective, but their usage is often determined by the group leader, and in trial content you will mostly fill in the gaps within your team for what they need. While the Arcanist can seem quite complex for new players, mastering it offers immense rewards, making it one of the top choices for both dungeons and trials. And next we've got the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer tank has become increasingly prominent in endgame trial content and is an excellent choice for specific group compositions alongside being incredibly easy to play. So that is one of the main reasons why you would choose one, because they are easy to play. The simplicity of Sorcerer tanking makes them great for beginners. They've got some really good group buffs, providing Major Berserk with their Storm Atronach ultimate, Minor Prophecy with their Exploitation passive, which boosts group DPS. They also have that Minor Intellect with Regenerative Ward. They've also got an enemy debuff by using Crystal Weapon to reduce enemy resistances. It's a unique debuff as well, so it will increase group damage. Some of the key features of the Sorcerer tank include their self-healing. They've got numerous options of self-healing now, including the Clan Fear, which offers a strong heal that scales with max health. It is one of the strongest heals in the game. They've also got Regenerative Ward, which does a heal, it's a massive shield, and some of their passives as well will just heal based on max health when casting a skill. So they're very, very strong. Their sustain is also notably easier than some other classes because they have a skill Dark Deal, which converts magicka into health and stamina, simplifying sustain similar to how Dragon Knights can, though it does require dropping block momentarily. They've also got really good survival skills. Bound Aegis can cap block mitigation, but also gives them additional resistances and other buffs, making it easier for survival. With the suitability, it's really down to group composition. It's ideal if there's no other sorcerer in a group, but it is kind of less useful if other sorcerers are present due to those overlapping buffs. For endgame trials, they are highly effective, with their strong buffs and debuffs often now wanted by group leaders. The Sorcerer tank is versatile and resilient, making them a valuable addition to many group compositions. Next we've got the Necromancer. The Necromancer is one of the most popular off-tank classes in ESO for trials, known for its superior damage over time mitigation and ultimate regeneration. However, it is not as beginner friendly as some of the other classes, excelling more in endgame content. So the main reasons to choose a Necromancer include their damage over time mitigation. They excel in mitigating dot attacks or bleeds, which are prevalent in newer trials and dungeons. They also regenerate ultimate faster than any other class thanks to skills like Necrotic Potency. They can provide a group damage increase with major vulnerability from their Colossus skill, which can significantly boost group damage. So this can now be replaced by gear sets such as Turning Tide and Archdruid, as these are seemingly more reliable. The self-healing of a Necro can be difficult for beginners as it requires melee hits on the enemy, which can be challenging in mobile fights. Some people find the stamina sustain difficult, especially players that are more inclined to block more often. There are some benefits in there such as off balance, minor vulnerability, and AoE major breach, although these can be provided much more easily by other sources. When we look at how suitable they are for content, they're ideal for endgame trials due to their excellent dock mitigation and ultimate regeneration, and they're best used in groups without other Necromancers or specific gear sets like Turning Tide or Archdruid, which will maximise then the benefits of the Necro. Some of the drawbacks though is they are harder to sustain and self-heal compared to other classes, sometimes making them less suitable for beginners. Their self-healing depends on melee attacks, which is problematic in transitional or mobile fights. The Necromancer does shine in endgame content with its unique strengths, but poses challenges for new players due to some of its complexities. Next we're looking at the Warden, and the Warden tank is fairly user friendly, especially at lower champion point levels, due to its powerful healing, shields and defensive group buffs. So the Warden provides minor toughness, increasing everyone's health by 10% via the maturation passive. They offer major resolve to the group with expansive Frostcloak, enhancing group survival and defense. They can also apply things like minor vulnerability from Fetcher Infection, which slightly boosts group DPS. The key features of the Warden include their self-healing. They've got very strong self-healing, which can also heal other players. They have a huge shield to protect themselves against projectile damage, useful against specific bosses, and they are quite suitable for beginners due to their straightforward abilities and strong defensive capabilities. So the most suitable use for a Warden is in specific group compositions. It's ideal if no other Warden is in group. They are much less useful if a Warden healer is present, as they provide overlapping buffs. The problem is that the Warden healer is one of the most common healers in the game. They do also excel in niche situations against bosses that deal heavy projectile damage, such as trial bosses Rakat and Zamaja. The drawbacks of the Warden, they do lack strong passives that significantly benefit tanks compared to other classes, and they're less often needed in organised groups where Warden healers are already present. Warden tanks are excellent for specific scenarios and provide unique support and defensive benefits. However, they are less necessary in groups with Warden healers and have limited offensive contributions. Next we've got the Nightblade. Nightblade tanks are gradually becoming slightly more viable, mainly in specific group compositions due to a reduction in Nightblade damage dealers, but a need for their unique group buff. Although they are strong as tanks, they are often replaced by other Nightblade roles and are generally not as effective as other classes. So the only real unique group buff from a Nightblade is minor savagery, but they do have additional group benefits with AoE minor vulnerability, AoE minor cowardice and AoE major cowardice. They also provide things like major expedition, minor endurance and minor intellect from their refreshing path. Some of the key features of the Nightblade: they've got better sustain and self-healing capabilities nowadays, making Nightblade tanks easier to play than they were before. They're excellent at applying AoE debuffs and damage reduction buffs. The main self-heal is Dark Cloak, a heal over time that is stronger when stationary. So while it does lack the power of a burst heal, it is a really big heal over time skill. When we look at their suitability though, they're useful in groups that need the unique buffs of a Nightblade. They can be effective in trials within certain groups, though they are still not very commonly used. The drawbacks is Nightblade tanks are not frequently used because they have limited and situational group benefits compared to the top tank classes. To maximise their effectiveness in 4-player content, they also need to really rely on the new scribing system to get their full benefit. So while Nightblade tanks have become more viable, they are situational and not the first choice for many groups. They offer one unique group buff and improve sustain and healing, but their limited group benefits and situational effectiveness makes them less desired compared to other tank classes. Then finally we've got the Templar. Templar tanks are not highly desirable in most groups, but can be effective in 4-person content. Templars provide minor sorcery via the Illuminate passive, though this buff is often avoided as it's not essential for most groups. They do have some utility skills with extended ritual and restoring aura, but they do lack a strong burst heal. It is compensated by multiple healing over time abilities such as Living Dark, extended rituals, restoring focus, which also grants stamina sustain and major resolve. They can be quite easy to sustain, especially in 4-player content because of repentance, which is a really nice skill, although this isn't as useful on boss fights. And they do have some survivability tools with Radiant Ward, which is a magicka costing health scaling damage shield that also provides minor protection. The biggest suitability are 4-person content. They're well suited for dungeons and smaller group activities, and they can offer some really good situational benefits with its range of healing and utility skills. The drawbacks though are minor sorcery is not widely needed, reducing the Templar's group utility, and currently it is the least used and least useful tank class in ESO, with limited desirability in larger group content. While Templar tanks can be effective in specific situations, the limited group buffs and niche utility makes them less favourable compared to other tank classes. Next we move on to tank race. Choosing the right race for your tank has always been a debated topic. While you can successfully tank with any race, the choice becomes more critical in hard mode trials and dungeon content. Any race can be used for tanking. You don't need to choose the best race to be successful. Race choices become more significant in high level content. If you don't plan on reaching the highest level of tanking, then race is less crucial. But it is a good idea to still pick one that is going to give you the benefits you need. I've got 2 choices for my favourite for a beginner. The first one is the Nord. Nords are the best choice for a tank in the long term. You benefit from increased resistance and ultimate gain. In the newer endgame content, those resistances are crucial to mitigate the high damage and provide more versatility. The key benefits include increased physical and spell resistance by 2600, increased stamina, increased max health, and when you take damage you gain 5 ultimate, and that effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So they've got some nice benefits there that do benefit a tank. The second option for a beginner tank would be the Red Guard. Red Guard is a fantastic choice for beginner tanks. They help with stamina sustain through the Adrenaline Rush passive, restoring 1005 stamina every 5 seconds when dealing damage. Their other benefits include a cost reduction of weapon abilities and increased stamina. Red Guard is particularly beneficial for players who struggle with stamina sustain, making it a good choice for casual tanks seeking immediate improvement to their sustain. We move on to tank attributes and the stats that you will have for your character. From level 1 to 50, each time you level up, you gain attribute points. At level 50, you will have a total of 64 attribute points to distribute. There's no absolute right or wrong way to set your attributes, but as a beginner, it's good to aim for some baseline level stats. I typically like to go for around 38k plus max health, having 18 to 20k plus max stamina, and then 16k plus max magicka. And this is to give you all the necessary things that you need as a beginner player to get through the content. Now, to achieve these stats, you will need to look at your gear and enchantments. You have to ensure that you have gear equipped and it is enchanted. You've then got your skills and passives. Slot all your skills, input all your passives, including class passives and all the other passives as well. Then you need to distribute any available champion points. And then finally, your food buff. Make sure you eat food to further boost your stats. Once you've done all that, the final thing is to allocate your attribute points as the very last thing. And you can fill them in where needed to get to the stats that is generally wanted. Typically, you can start by placing 64 points into health and then using stamina and magicka glyphs on your gear. This initial setup can change as you progress and adapt to different content. Once you obtain a good tank set, you want to invest in prismatic defense glyphs, which are also known as tri-stat glyphs, to gain more maximum stats. Although they are expensive, they are superior to single stat glyphs, providing 2,676 more overall total stats. It is important to have high max health because tank-based healing and damage shields scale with max health. So the more max health you have, the larger your heals and damage shields will be, providing more room for error and increased survivability. We do have to try and balance our stats, so don't focus solely on health. Even if you have 60k health, insufficient magicka or stamina can still lead to failure, as you won't be able to heal or block effectively if you don't have any resources. Max stamina is essential for blocking. Now, stamina is not regained while blocking, so sustaining stamina is more important than having a larger pool of stamina. You also have to ensure that your stamina is higher than your magicka. When using synergies like orbs and shards, they restore the resource with the highest max value. And with max magicka, it's necessary for skill usage and healing. When you aim for that 16k mark, it allows you to maintain casting skills and healing without running out too quickly. Magicka sustain is generally easier because you are able to regenerate this while blocking, so you will focus more into magicka recovery. To sustain your resources, focus on sustaining stamina rather than maximizing it. Learn mechanics to block less, use heavy attacks, food, potions and harmony jewelry to improve your sustain. We'll be covering this a bit more in detail later in the guide. and with Magicka Sustain it's much easier due to that regeneration. Aim for high Magicka recovery rather than high max Magicka. For a tank's Mundus Stone, the Mundus Stone does provide additional benefits, and they're found throughout the world of the Elder Scrolls Online, including inside player houses. You want to collect one as soon as possible for the free benefits that enhance your character. The main option for a tank is the Atronach. This will increase Magicka recovery by 310. If you wear 7 pieces of Divine's gear, it will increase Magicka recovery by 507. It is the most popular Mundus Stone for tanks due to its significant Magicka recovery benefits. The reasons why we choose the Atronach is because Magicka recovery is crucial for casting spells and using skills efficiently. It will improve that sustain. It's essential because healing, shielding, crowd controlling, protecting yourself all costs Magicka. And the real critical point is Magicka recovery continues while blocking, unlike stamina recovery, making it vital for improved sustain. These are the locations for the Atronach Mundus Stone in the base game areas. Next we want to look at tank food and drink. For tanking there are a few excellent food and drink options to consider. First we've got tri-stat food, and we've got the Crown Fortifying Meal, which increases max health, Magicka and stamina. This is obtained for free from the daily login rewards. Don't buy this from the Crown store, you sometimes get this for free just by logging in and claiming those rewards. It's usable from level 1, so it's useful for leveling and a good fallback if other options are too costly or if you run out of other food. The step up from that is Bewitched Sugar Skulls, which offers tri-stat again, which is slightly higher stats, and then health recovery, making it a slightly superior option. The recipe is only available during the Witches' Festival, over Halloween, or the food can be brought pretty cheaply from the guild traders. This is an ideal food to use until you can move on to something better for you. We've then got Sustain Drinks with Ozaga's Red Frothgar. This provides high Magicka recovery and increased max health, but it reduces max Magicka and stamina compared to using the tri-stat food. It's great for sustain, but may be challenging for those who need higher max stamina and Magicka pools, and it's not as useful with Harmony Jewelry. A more advanced option would be the Jewels of Misrule food, which is best used by experienced tanks who block less because it offers additional stamina regeneration. It's not recommended for beginners or those who block frequently because it will just be wasted, and those tanks that use Harmony Jewelry will be better off using tri-stat food. The best thing to do is to choose the food that best suits your needs and budget. Try to obtain the recipe so you can make it yourself, as that will be easier in the long term, but the food isn't that expensive to just buy. Next we're looking at champion points, and these are earned after reaching level 50 with your first ESO character. If you have a character with CP levels already, you can apply all the earned champion points that you have to your new tank character immediately. While tanking at low CP levels is possible, having at least 1200 CP is recommended for veteran and hard mode content. This amount provides significant benefits including increased stats, recoveries and defense, which is crucial for effective tanking. There are 2 types of champion points. You have slottable champion points, which need to be equipped on your champion bar to be active. You've then also got passive champion points, which are always active and don't need to be slotted. To begin with, focus on 4 main fitness champion points and 4 warfare that will give you the most benefit, combined with all of the passive champion points that don't need to be slotted. So with warfare you'll take things like Ironclad, Duelist Rebuff, Bulwark and Enduring Resolve. With fitness it'd be something like Boundless Vitality, Fortified, Rejuvenation and Bracing Anchor. For a detailed breakdown on champion point allocation from 160 to 2000 CP plus, refer to my tank champion point page for your optimized setup and progression. And then we move on to tank gear. As a tank, having multiple sets of gear is crucial for flexibility in providing self buffs, group buffs and general trial viability. Your strength comes from class passives, champion points, skills, gear traits and enchants. Many tank sets are underwhelming, emphasizing the need for sets that offer group benefits. In group content, tanks play a vital role in debuffing enemies and buffing group members. Faster enemy kills makes tanking easier, reducing the need for prolonged survival and sustain and mechanics. Prioritize sets that enhance group performance to make fights quicker and more manageable. When first tanking content, use gear that enhances your survival or sustain if needed. This helps you to learn enemy mechanics, positioning and overall survivability. As you gain experience, switch to sets that offer significant group benefits instead, helping your team complete the content more efficiently. Each gear set has strengths and weaknesses. For example, Leeching Plate is useful in fights with many enemies, but ineffective in boss fights with fewer targets. Start with comfortable gear and optimize your build over time. Be mindful of gear weight when selecting a set. With Powerful Assault, it's a strong group buff, but it's a medium armor set, so it should be used on weapons and jewelry to maintain the heavy armor benefits on your body pieces. And then there's sets like Saxaheel Champion, which activates when you use your ultimate, so it only needs to be equipped on your one bar, so you can put it on your ice staff and jewelry, or 3 other gear pieces with your ice staff. It does not need to be active at all times on both of your bars. With monster sets, they're obtained by completing veteran dungeons for the helmets, and daily undaunted pledges for shoulders. Each set is useful in different situations. For beginners, Engine Guardian is highly recommended for its sustain, provides you various different resources, helping you to maintain block and overall survivability. In the long term though, this will need to be replaced with a more beneficial group set. And then the final thing regarding your actual build is the tank gear traits and enchants. Gear in ESO comes in 3 weights: heavy, medium and light. As a tank, you should use at least 5 pieces of heavy armor. This provides increased resistances, health and sustain from the heavy armor passives. The most common setup to go with is 5 heavy, 1 medium and 1 light. This 5-1-1 configuration allows you to gain additional passives and bonuses from light and medium armor, offering some minor additional benefits, but also increased max stats through your Undaunted Metal passive. Setting up as a beginner tank will differ from a long-term setup, but you want to focus on traits and enchants that enhance your survival and sustain. As you progress, you'll need to adjust your gear to improve your tanking capabilities further. So on the chest, legs and head, these are classed as big slots because they provide the full value of an enchant or glyph. The primary trait on this gear would ideally be Divines, which buffs your Mundus Stone, enhancing your magic recovery and overall sustain. Other options include Sturdy or Reinforced. You can use Sturdy to reduce the cost of block if necessary. If you're struggling with high incoming damage, use Reinforced to increase resistances, but ensure resistances do not exceed the cap of 33,100 when you're fully buffed. The best enchant is the Prismatic Defense or Tri-Stack Glyph. These enchants boost health, stamina and magicka, but can be very expensive. For beginners, you can use a single stat enchant. On the big slots, prioritize stamina enchants if you have all attributes allocated into health. For your shoulders, hands, waist and feet, these are classified as small slots because the enchant values on these slots are significantly smaller than those on the big armor slots. The primary trait that you want to use on this is Divines to buff your Mundus Stone, and again the enchants would be those tri-stat, but since these are small enchants, you can use either stamina or magicka to balance out your stats, especially if you have all of your attribute points allocated into health. Eventually aim for tri-stat enchants on all slots, but until then, focus on reaching the suggested stats from the attribute section by using the single stat enchants, but magicka ideally. Shields are classified as big slots as well, similar to chest, legs and helmets. Note that the benefits of a shield and its enchant are only active on the bar where the shield is equipped. The primary traits here would be Divines again, but you could also consider Sturdy for the reduced block cost, useful for blocking on the main bar, Reinforced, which increases resistances, which is also useful for blocking those big hits on your front bar, or potentially well fitted to reduce roll dodge and sprint cost while on this bar. And then again for the enchants, Stamina would be ideal because it's a big slot, or Tri-Stat is recommended for that long-term progression. On your one-handed weapon, you will need to use a one-handed weapon on your front bar with a shield. The type of one-handed weapon doesn't matter, as they all perform equally when paired with a shield, unlike with dual wield. One-handed weapons have half the value of their trait and enchant compared to two-handed weapons. For this reason, things like Decisive are excellent for regenerating ultimate faster. Infused is good for slightly boosting your weapon enchants, but lacks a new benefit like you get from Decisive. Defending is great for increasing resistances if you're struggling with incoming damage and have low resistances or low champion points. For the enchant on a one-handed weapon, the weapon glyph has half the value, so you use them to benefit yourself mostly. Strong group-based glyphs should be used on a two-handed weapon on your back bar for the full value. Using Absorb Stamina will give you extra incoming stamina, although very small amounts. You can also use an Infused Weakening glyph on the front bar which debuffs enemies, reducing their damage. This is usually applied by a healer, however. Another option is Infused Hardening, which provides a small damage shield. And then you've got the Charged Shot glyph, which offers minor vulnerability to the group to do more damage against one enemy. For the back bar weapon, use an Ice Staff. Always use an Ice Staff. This is because the Ice Staff is essentially a tank weapon that reduces incoming damage and block cost when it's used. An Ice Staff is a two-handed weapon, thus providing the full benefit of their traits and enchants, unlike the one-handed weapon, and using an infused Ice Staff with a Crusher enchant maximises your tanking effectiveness and group support. It is also possible to use double Ice Staff on the front and back bar, but it is a little bit trickier for newer players to do this, so I'd advise trying a one-hand and shield first with an Ice Staff before moving on to double Ice Staff tanking. Some key points here are to avoid using the Trifocus passive. Do not use this passive, as it makes you block with Magicka instead of Stamina, making it hard to cast abilities, especially problematic for beginner players. And the Destruction Staff skills, every one offers significant benefits to a tank and group utility when using an Ice Staff, making it the best choice of other weapons, including a double one-hand and shield setup. The best traits to go with are Infused, which enchants the power of your weapon enchantment, and also the Crusher enchant, which provides a valuable group buff by reducing enemies' resistances, and then combined with the Infused trait makes it even stronger. Finally, we look at Jewelry. So when starting out, use Jewelry with whatever trait it drops in. Typically that'll be Healthy, Robust or Arcane. These are not valuable traits in the long term, however. The best traits to use are Harmony, which provides a significant resource boost when activating a synergy. However, it's less effective if your group doesn't provide any synergies. This is often the case in random content. So therefore, the better option would be to use Infuse, which is best for beginners as it does improve sustain. Using 3 Infused pieces would be recommended for a beginner, especially if you plan on doing things like random dungeons and you don't play in any kind of organised group. For your enchants, there's a few different options for this as well. Firstly, we've got Bracing enchants. Initially, you might want to use 1 to 2 Bracing enchants to reduce your block cost. This is helpful as new players often block frequently, and by using 1 or 2 Bracing enchants, we get the same block cost as we would from using a full set of sturdy gear. So we can get used to having more Magicka recovery by having a full Divine setup and then just combating that with Bracing enchants. Secondly, there's Magicka recovery. This is the best enchant, and it's ideal to use 3 Magicka enchants if you can. This will greatly improve your ability to tank by enhancing your Magicka sustain for frequent skill usage. And the third option is Prismatic cost reduction. This is good for experienced players who cast many skills very frequently and have high recovery to benefit from the cost reduction. It is much more useful if you are frequently using short duration stamina skills, so it is a long-term option. My recommended jewelry setup would be 3 Infused with 1 to 2 Bracing alongside 1 to 2 Magicka recovery, or just go with 3 Magicka recovery if you can sustain the block cost. Okay, now we've covered all the details on building your character, we're going to look at actually how to put all this into action. One of the first things we've got to think about is resistances and mitigation. So as a tank in ESO, reducing incoming damage and the damage dealt by bosses is crucial for survival. There are 3 key aspects to this, which include armor/resistances, block mitigation, and general overall mitigation. Combining these elements is essential for staying alive as a tank. So when we talk about resistances, which is often referred to as armor, they are divided into spell and physical resistance, each with a couple of subcategories. So spell resistance mitigates magic attacks, which includes flame, shock, ice, and magic damage. Physical resistance mitigates physical attacks, including disease, poison, and bleed damage. The resistance cap in the game is 33,100, equating to 50% damage mitigation. Each 660 resistance provides 1% damage mitigation. Resistances are displayed on your character information screen. At lower CP levels with non-optimized gear, resistances are crucial. You want to aim for the resistance cap in the most recent content where damage sources are high, but for the older base game content, 25 to 30k resistances are more than sufficient. Sources of resistance include major and minor resolve buffs, champion points, gear, reinforced trait gear, and the defending weapon trait. For your long-term success as a tank, it is a good idea, make sure you are reaching that resistance cap. Next we've got block mitigation, and block mitigation reduces the damage from enemy attacks when you block. There is a cap to this which is 90%, meaning you reduce the incoming damage by 90% when blocking. You're able to see what your current block mitigation number is by going onto your character sheet and looking at your advanced stats section. Bleed and damage over time effects cannot be blocked, and they are unaffected by block mitigation. To give you an example, a 100,000 damage attack by a boss is reduced to 10,000 with a 90% block mitigation. Typically, block mitigation ranges from 70 to 80% for a tank, which is pretty general without too much focus into it, while using the Bracing Anchor Champion Point passive alongside heavy armor. Skills such as the heavy armor skill Immovable and specific sorcerer skills can help you reach the cap much more easily. When we look at overall mitigation, mitigation combines all actions that reduce damage. This includes things like resistances, gear set bonuses and champion points. Enemy debuffs also which reduce the enemy's damage, such as the infused weakening enchant, major and minor maim, and major and minor cowardice. Overall mitigation is uncapped, but stacking too high offers diminishing returns and penalties to ensure some damage is always taken. Maximizing overall mitigation involves using block mitigation, stacking resistances, and applying buffs and debuffs. Utilize block mitigation with resistances, minor aegis, major and minor protection, unique gear buffs, and enemy debuffs to enhance your survival as a tank. Scribing is a new system introduced with the Gold Road chapter, playing a crucial role in enhancing tanking capabilities by providing easily accessible effects such as immobilizations, magicka pulls, and damage shields. It also offers buffs and debuffs that were previously unobtainable, such as major cowardice, major vitality, AoE minor resolve, minor vulnerability, minor brittle, along with class-specific buffs and improved sustain. Some of the key points of the scribing system: it allows for customizable enchantments to your tank, which vary with each class. You need to own the Gold Road chapter and complete the scribing quest to access everything, and the components of the scribing system include obtaining the grimoires, which are the base spells. You've then got to obtain the scripts, which are the spell effects, and then obtain the ink, which is a crafting material, which are used to create the powerful tank spells. Scribing offers a customizable way to enhance your tanking capabilities, making it an essential tool for improving performance and adapting to different scenarios. I'm just going to give a couple of examples of scribed skills, especially for beginners that might be able to put some of these together to help them in various scenarios depending on the class that you're using. The first one would be Wield Soul. Now with this you'd use the focus script Pull, the signature script Druid's Resurgence, and then the affix script Vitality. And then this becomes a magicka costing skill that pulls enemies, taunts them, and returns resources. It replaces the need for Silver Leash, and this skill is beneficial for all classes, as it allows tanks to use magicka to cast a skill, which then returns stamina, aiding in overall sustain. Additionally, it provides a major buff or debuff, and you can choose which one suits your build's needs the most. But two excellent options are Major Vitality for increased healing received, and Major Cowardice to reduce enemy damage output. This is particularly good for beginners because if you really needed to, you should have that high stacked Magicka recovery, and then you can benefit from this while blocking, so you can just keep casting Wield Soul, and it will restore 1,000 stamina just by using up your Magicka, which is a resource that you can gain while blocking. So since your Magicka is a resource that you can gain back while blocking through Magicka recovery, this is particularly good for beginners because you're now able to gain sustain from your stamina while blocking by just casting Wield Soul. So it's a really good thing to use. A couple of other options you could use are Soul Burst and Contingency. The reason why you might use these is because they provide accessibility to a potential immobilization skill available to all classes, which isn't available on some. Contingency also gives you the option of Gladiator's Tenacity, which reduces incoming damage. So there's a lot of different options. You just need to invest some time into playing around and finding the best scribe skills to suit your needs. When we look at the types of tanking in ESO, you can be categorized into several types based on the kind of content that they focus on. So you've got a general tank. This would be a tank that focuses on 4-player content, arenas, general activities like pledges and daily content. You've then got a main tank, which takes on the primary role in 12-player trials, maintaining aggro on the main boss and handling the primary threats. We've then got an off tank, which assists the main tank in trial content, taunting additional enemies, stacking ad pulls, providing additional group support. They may sometimes trade taunts with a main tank or handle separate bosses in multi-boss trials. And then finally we've got a hybrid tank. This is a tank that is capable of tanking enemies while also dealing some damage, commonly used for solo, overland questing, delve kind of content, and sometimes very irregularly as an off tank in some of the older trials or dungeons with minimal damage and mechanics. Each tank type has its own unique responsibilities, and understanding these different roles is important because you will have to play in different ways in the different types of content in the game. Now we've got some fundamental details of tanking with taunting and aggro. Taunting is the primary focus of tanks in the Elder Scrolls Online, and the main method of forcing an enemy to target and attack you, which is also known as having aggro. The key points about taunting an enemy: it is achieved by using specific skills that trigger a taunt on the enemy. Taunts last for 15 seconds and require regular refreshing to maintain that taunt, and each enemy needs to be taunted individually. Area taunting, or taunting multiple enemies with one skill or button press, is not possible in ESO. Unlike many other MMORPGs, tanks don't have to manage threat levels. Simply taunting and refreshing the taunt every 15 seconds keeps enemies focused onto you. If you lose taunt or don't retaunt within the timer, enemies will often target other group members until you retaunt them. Taunting is the most important tank responsibility, so understanding and mastering it is crucial before getting started doing anything else. So first we've got the types of taunt that are available. There are multiple ways to apply a taunt to an enemy in ESO, including melee taunts, ranged taunts, and chain taunts. These taunts can cost either stamina or magicka, and are fundamental for managing aggro on enemies. So two of the most common taunts that you'll use: you've got Pierce Armor, which is a melee ranged, stamina costing taunt from the one-handed shield skill line. This skill not only taunts, but also debuffs enemies, making them take more damage. Alternatively, you've also got Frost Clench, which is a 28 meter magicka costing taunt from the Destruction Staff skill line, and you'll need to use a Frost Staff to get access to this. It taunts enemies and reduces their damage output. Both Pierced Armor and Frost Clench have a 15-second duration, forcing enemies to focus their attacks on you for the whole duration. Chain taunts are primarily used to pull enemies into a stack with other enemies. While their main function is to pull enemies, they do also apply a taunt. However, they only taunt enemies that are untaunted, and you cannot refresh an existing taunt until it expires when using a chain, which can be risky. But these chain taunts do also last for 15 seconds. Some examples of chain taunts include Silver Leash, Unrelenting Grip on a Dragon Knight, Beckoning Armor on a Necromancer, and even the Swarm Mother monster set, which does provide a chain taunt effect also. And then, as we mentioned in the scribing section, Wield Soul and some of the scribing skills can be customized into a chain taunt too. Other taunts include Inner Fire, which is a magicka costing range taunt from the Undaunted skill line. You've got Runic Sunder, which is exclusive to Arcanists. And then the Tormentor gear set. It's also possible to taunt using that. When you deal damage with the Charge, Leap, Teleport, or Pull ability, it will also taunt the enemy. Now, it's important to learn about some of the other sides of taunting, which include Overtaunt and Taunt Immunity. So Overtaunt occurs when multiple players taunt the same enemy too frequently within a short space of time, causing the enemy to become taunt immune. There are some mechanics regarding Overtaunting. So enemies become taunt immune after being taunted 5 times between 2 unique targets. When you taunt an enemy, an additional debuff now appears to show how many times the target has been taunted by another source. So you can see this by looking at the enemy debuffs. And this visual cue will help you track taunt applications and avoid reaching that taunt immunity threshold. The duration of the taunt stack counter is 7 seconds. This means the taunt stacks fall off after 7 seconds, which gives more breathing room in multi-boss trials and encounters. The effects of Overtaunt include Taunt Immunity, so this lasts for 7 seconds. It aligns with the taunt stack counter duration, and this synchronization helps you to know how long the target will be taunt immune. The taunt counter is now visible, but it previously was a hidden mechanic, and it's worth noting that some targets are naturally immune to taunts due to their own effects and mechanics. These targets will not display the taunt immunity icon. Now, when you have taunt, you might want to start tracking that, and it's useful to do so that you don't lose taunt of an enemy. You can use the in-game buff and debuff tracker. To do that, you simply go on your options, combat, buffs and debuffs. On the all, go to always show. On target debuffs, turn that on, and then from other players off. When you taunt an enemy, look at the top of your screen. Focus on the enemy you are targeting with your middle cursor, and look at the health bar at the top of the UI. Debuffs will be displayed beneath the health bar, showing the debuff you have applied and the remaining duration, which includes taunt, which looks like this particular icon. For single bosses, you can enable the ability bar timers to track your taunt skills easily as well. Do this by going to options, combat, ability timers, and turning those on. Now you can just watch the timer of your taunt skills instead and refresh your taunt once the skill timer almost expires, and that will make it easy to maintain aggro. For PC players, add-ons such as Untaunted can significantly improve your taunt tracking, and these can also be customized and moved around to suit your needs. Another important thing regarding taunt is tab targeting. So when dealing with multiple targets stacked in a small area, taunting the right enemy can be challenging. The best way to focus on specific targets is by using tab targeting. So on PC, to do this, you point your cursor at the enemy and press tab. On console, point your cursor at the enemy and press the right analog stick in, also known as R3. When you tab target an enemy, they get a white highlight around them, making them easier to see. This also helps focus most of your skills towards the selected enemy. Now, some of the benefits: tab targeting is particularly useful for focusing on priority enemies in ad pools, ensuring that you gain taunt more easily without other enemies blocking your view. And while not 100% reliable, tab targeting significantly increases the accuracy of your taunts and your skills. To turn off a tab target, perform the same action by pressing tab or R3 while facing away from the enemy. This can be necessary if you've tab targeted an enemy but need to taunt additional ads that spawn in during a boss fight. And then the final thing regarding taunt is Taunt Priority. One of the tricky parts of taunting is figuring out which enemy to taunt first. The health bars help identify the priority targets, with stronger enemies indicated by specific health bar features. So regular enemies have a small health bar, and these don't need to be taunted at all. They usually can be controlled with crowd control abilities, and your group can kill them with area damage. They typically have low health. Just use crowd control skills on regular enemies instead of wasting taunts. You only need to taunt them, if necessary, after handling higher priority targets. But it can be a good idea to taunt any two-handed melee regular enemies, because sometimes they can come in and heavy attack the damage dealers. Next, we've got elite enemies, and these have a real clear visual indicator. They have extra markers alongside the health bar, which indicate that they are stronger and the health bar is slightly bigger. These are the main taunt priority, as they can easily kill group members with simple attacks. They are often mixed in with regular enemies and can be found in the middle of larger ad pools, so taunt them as soon as possible. And then finally, you've got bosses. So bosses also have an elite style health bar, but an additional health bar on the compass at the top of the screen, and it's kind of extended out as well at the sides. Maintaining aggro on bosses is crucial, as they cause significant damage to unprepared group members, so always prioritize taunting bosses. When we look at the general taunt rule, there's a certain priority order that you can use when deciding which enemies need to be taunted. So number 1 would be bosses, then elite enemies, third would be melee two-handed regular enemies, then other regular melee enemies, and then finally regular ranged enemies. By using that priority list, you can ensure that the most dangerous threats are controlled and you're able to keep your group safe. Blocking is one of the most crucial survival tools in ESO, but many tanks struggle to fully understand how to block effectively. This is a detailed guide to help you master the essentials to blocking. So first, some key points about blocking. Blocking costs stamina. While blocking, you cannot gain stamina via stamina regeneration, as it becomes turned off. An exception to this is using an ice staff with the Tri-Focus passive. This allows you to block with magicka, but this turns off magicka recovery, which is problematic since most tank skills cost magicka. Therefore, using the Tri-Focus passive is not recommended. When blocking, you instantly reduce incoming damage by 50%. You also gain the benefits of block mitigation, which can be stacked up to a maximum of 90%. At this cap, you only receive 10% of the incoming damage. Bar swapping can now be done safely while maintaining your block, which makes it easier to maintain skill up times and manage incoming damage. One common mistake, especially for beginners, is blocking too much. Perma blocking leads to sustain issues, as you will eventually run out of stamina and be unable to block when needed. Aim for a block cost of around 1000 stamina per hit. Lowering this further is possible, but not significantly beneficial beyond 900, as it requires more effort and sacrifices from within your build. To reduce your block cost, use 1 or 2 bracing enchants on your jewelry to reduce block cost until you are comfortable with blocking. Be aware of diminishing returns when stacking block cost reduction. Damage over time and bleed damage cannot be blocked, so blocking and block mitigation do nothing to reduce the incoming damage from either of these effects. To sustain blocking, there's a few things that you really need to look at doing. Firstly, selective blocking. You do not need to block every single hit from the enemy. Focus on blocking heavy attacks and mechanic attacks. Other damage can be mitigated through resistances, healing, damage shields, buffing, and debuffing the enemies. If that's a bit too scary for you, you could try intermittent blocking. So for tanks accustomed to perma blocking, the first step would be to try dropping block intentionally for a few seconds and then reblocking. This causes reduced stamina loss and maintains a sense of safety. And it just gets you used to dropping block and then reblocking again so that you're not doing it permanently. When you are blocking, you've got to sustain it using some various stamina regeneration methods, including your potions and passives. You've got to use potions, have your class passives unlocked to help you regain stamina while blocking. You also want to make sure you're using synergies, as activating synergies does return resources. By using Harmony Jewelry, this will also increase that benefit. And there are also skills as well that will return stamina. So the Dragon Knight, for example, has Igneous Shield, which can return stamina when you cast it. And that's because it's a magicka costing skill. When you cast it, it procs one of the Dragon Knight passives, which gives stamina. So it means that you can use that as a sustain tool while blocking to give yourself stamina back. Now with all classes, they can use the Scribing system and that Wield Soul skill with that specific script we mentioned earlier to also regain stamina and do that same thing. So for the best practices for blocking, you've got to learn fight mechanics. You need to understand when to block big attacks and when it's safe to drop block. You also need to optimize your build to include high resistances, self buffs and enemy debuffs, which will help reduce incoming damage and help you to sustain blocking. And then utilize different skills and synergies and all of the tools that are available, making use of potions as well, which will help you manage your resources effectively. Positioning enemies is an integral part of ESO tanking, but there isn't a common method that applies to all situations. However, a few simple rules can help guide you with positioning enemies. For add pulls, these are usually positioned slightly in front of their starting location. As you approach the adds, let them move towards you so that the ranged enemies come within range of your chain skills or the Void Bash proc if you're using it, if you know what that is. If you are using Void Bash, you'd never activate it immediately when entering an add pull. Instead, you put down something like Elemental Blockade to make the enemies start moving. Then you drop something like a Razor Caltrops in front of them to slow them down and snare them. You circle around the first enemy, you hit your Void Bash, it pulls everything in. This ensures that almost all enemies within 12 meters are pulled in, and the goal in add pulls is to gather enemies into a stack and hold them still for your damage dealers to quickly eliminate them with AoE attacks. You always turn enemies away from your group to prevent cleave attacks from hitting them. For boss fights, it can be a little bit different, and positioning depends on the type of boss and the mechanics that are involved. There are some stationary bosses in the game, and you just hold them where they are because they often cannot be moved, or they will move when they want to move or by themselves. You've got teleporting bosses. It's simple, you just follow them around the room wherever they go to. Generally, bosses either are tanked at the edge of a room or in the very center. With center positioning, it's used when it's an open area and there's mechanics or there's adds that spawn throughout the fight, and so having a middle location is the most preferred option. When you go to the edge of an area, this is used when bosses drop AoEs or fill the room with effects. So moving to the edges provides more space for you and your group. As a general rule, taunt the boss, keep it in the middle of the room and turn it away from the group. This strategy will work for most bosses in ESO. It is important to turn enemies away from the group. It's critical, in fact, because bosses often perform cleave attacks that hit the area in front of them, or they drop AoEs and damage under the tank. Damage dealers should not stand behind the tank, as they will get hit by these effects. Avoid moving bosses unnecessarily, as it causes significant damage loss. Many damage dealers' abilities and ultimates are ground based, so moving the boss can pull them out of these effects, slowing down the kill and worsening sustain for damage dealers as they have to recast their abilities and potentially waste their ultimates. Tank survival is crucial in every aspect of the game. A dead tank often leads to a dead group, making it nearly impossible to clear content and defeat bosses if the tank cannot stay alive. Some key tips for tank survival. Number 1 is sustain. One of the most common reasons for a tank death is a lack of sustain, preventing them from blocking effectively or healing themselves to stay alive. Ensuring you have enough resources to maintain block and use your skills is really important. Number 2 is self buffs and debuffs. You've got to use self buffs to reduce incoming damage and apply debuffs to enemies to lower their damage output. Incorporate self healing and damage shields to enhance your survivability. Then it's learn patterns as number 3. With experience, you will notice patterns in enemies' movements, abilities, damage and mechanics, and all the timing that goes with those. Experience is really the key to effective tanking. Number 4, having high resistances and health. When learning a fight for the first time, prioritize high resistances and mitigation alongside high max health and use gear that you are comfortable with. This ensures survival as you familiarise yourself with the encounter. Number 5 is adapt and improve. For more specific advice on boss fight mechanics, you can join the Tank Club Discord where you can get personalised help from other tanks, or additionally you can watch me over on Twitch when I stream regular dungeon trial and arena content from the tank perspective, and you're more than welcome to come and ask any questions. So with tank survival we've got blocking. Blocking is absolutely critical for survival as a tank in ESO. It may sound simple, but mastering the art of blocking can make the difference between life and death for you and your group. Obviously we just discussed that in the blocking section, so refer to that for more information. Block casting is an essential skill for tanks in ESO, especially in veteran content. It allows you to cast most of your abilities while maintaining block, ensuring you stay protected even while using skills. The key points about block casting: so you can cast most abilities while holding the block button. Your character may appear to drop block during the animation, but you are still holding block. This can be seen by the little shield icon at the very front of your character. Block casting is the safest option, significantly reducing the damage that you take during combat. The vast majority of your abilities are safe to block cast, including taunt, heals, crowd control abilities, pretty much everything. The exception to that are channel or cast time abilities. So these abilities will force you to drop block, and it's always things that have a channel or a cast time. Some examples of this are Stone Giant from a Dragon Knight, or Dark Deal from a Sorcerer, and then certain Scribing Skills as well also have this, but the vast majority of skills don't need to be worried about. Timing your potions, especially health or tri-stat potions, is also crucial for survival. They provide a quick burst of health and resources if you get hit by something unexpected. There's two things to consider with this. You need to decide if you want your potion as an emergency resource or heal tool. This approach is beneficial when learning new content, as it provides a safety net when you face an unfamiliar threat and when you take that damage that you're not expecting. But the other thing to consider is using potions regularly for their recovery benefits, which ensures continuous resource management, which is better for your overall sustain. The best practices are to save potions for critical moments, activate them when you need to recover from unexpected damage. This strategy is especially useful for newer players in that unfamiliar content, but you do want to try and carry potions and use them actively to benefit from their recovery effects, especially for long-term progressive tanking. Not using potions can have a detrimental effect on your performance as you miss out on vital resources and health boosts. Buffing yourself is another essential for managing damage and staying alive as a tank in ESO. Key buffs that you want to try and maintain include Major and Minor Resolve. These buffs provide significant resistances and reduce your incoming damage. Additional buffs include Minor Protection, which you get from slotting Temporal Guard or other skills, and this will reduce your incoming damage by 5%. You've also got Major Protection, which you can gain by slotting Revealing Flare to gain that, which reduces incoming damage by another 10%. You've got gear provided buffs, including Minor Aegis, which will reduce your incoming damage from trial and dungeon enemies. You've also got unique damage reduction, so certain gear sets like Pearlescent Ward and Lucent Echoes offer unique damage reduction benefits. Healing buffs also really help, so Major and Minor Vitality increases healing received, Major and Minor Mending increases healing done, and then general buffs as well. Any buffs that boost resistances, damage reduction, mitigation, incoming healing, or extra resources are invaluable for tanking. Enemy debuffing is also an effective way to reduce the damage that enemies will deal to you, thereby improving your survivability as a tank. Some of the key techniques include using a Frost Staff with the Destructive Clench skill. This will taunt and apply Major Maim. So using Destructive Clench with the Frost Staff taunts the enemy and applies Major Maim, reducing their damage by 10%. This skill also guarantees the Chilled effect, which then applies Minor Maim, reducing the enemy's damage by an additional 5%. Combined, this results in a total damage reduction of 15%. You've then also got Major and Minor Cowardice. These debuffs lower the enemy's weapon and spell damage. The scribing system has made these debuffs more accessible, allowing you to reduce the enemy's damage output significantly. And then the infused weapon with the weakening glyph. This will reduce the enemy's damage, and this debuff is often applied by a healer, but if it isn't, use it on your one-handed weapon to ensure the enemy's damage is minimized. Building up your resistances is fundamental to reducing incoming damage and surviving as a tank in ESO. There are some key points to remember. So the maximum benefit that you can gain from resistances in PvE content is 33,100. Always aim to reach this cap to maximize your damage mitigation. High resistances significantly reduces the amount of damage that you take, making it easier to survive encounters, especially challenging content. The main methods to increase your resistances are Major and Minor Resolve. Utilize skills that provide these buffs. You've got champion points, so there are certain resistance buffing nodes that you can use. And then you've got things like your race and gear that you can also consider if you're under the resistance cap. So you can use the Nord race for its resistance bonuses, you can equip reinforced gear to boost resistances, or use a defending one-handed weapon to increase them as well. Self-healing is often necessary, especially in dungeon groups without a healer, or if it's an inexperienced healer or maybe the healer dies. There are several methods to heal yourself as a tank. Number one is burst healing. So it provides a large heal in a short amount of time, crucial for recovering from big hits. An example of this would be the Dragon Knight's Dragon Blood skill, which scales with your max health, making it more effective with higher health pools. You want to save it for moments of high incoming damage. It's expensive to recast it frequently, so you don't want to use it all the time. When you combine this with healing buffs such as Major Mending, for example, it makes the burst heal even more potent. Burst heals can also critically heal, providing extra healing on top of the initial amount. Another type of healing is healing over time. These provide small, continuous heals over an extended period. An example of this would be the Dragon Knight's Cinderstorm skill, which offers sustained healing over 15 seconds. This is ideal for mitigating small, regular damage. It helps sustain health without consuming too many resources. Another thing would be health recovery, a character stat that automatically restores health once every 2 seconds. Sources of this include class passives and heavy armor passives, minor fortitude, and potions providing major fortitude, the Witch Sugar Skull's food, and the strategic reserve champion point passive. This typically provides around 1k health recovery. Most tanks benefit from that, which is the equivalent to 500 healing per second. While not substantial for high health pools, it does add up over long fights. And then finally we've got damage shields. So these absorb damage, protecting your actual health bar. Use damage shields to mitigate incoming damage. An example of a damage shield would be something like Igneous Shield on a Dragon Knight, which provides a strong damage shield which will take the damage so you don't get a full hit to your health bar. And many classes have access to these, and there's also different damage shields built within the Scribing system, and they are really useful to use, especially if you want to go and try and practice not blocking as much. By using damage shields you won't have to block as much because you'll be protected. Some general tips for self-healing: so you want to have high magicka recovery so that you're able to sustain healing and other magicka based skills. Use a combination of burst healing, healing over time, and damage shields to cover you through different damage scenarios. Utilize buffs like Major and Minor Vitality for increased healing received, and Major and Minor Mending for increased healing done to improve your healing capability for yourself. And the final survival tool here is Roll Dodge. Roll Dodge is a crucial but often underused technique among new players. It can be expensive in terms of stamina, but its benefits for survival are significant. So the way that dodge roll works is that you will evade damage for the next 2 seconds after doing a roll dodge. So any attack that isn't a locked in channel attack can be avoided. Now channel attacks are certain attacks that an enemy does, so Dark Barrage in Maw of Lorcash from the Rakat boss, and Nocturnal's Favour from Zamaja in Cloud Rest are fixed onto you and cannot be avoided by roll dodging. You will actually just get hit by an unblocked hit if you do roll dodge these specific attacks. When you use roll dodge, most attacks in the game are not locked onto you and can be evaded with a roll dodge. Use roll dodge in critical situations such as after taking a big hit or when overwhelmed to evade damage and buy time to heal or escape. Develop the habit of instantly reacting with a roll dodge to evade damage for a few seconds after you do take a big hit to ensure your survival. Sustain is one of the hardest aspects of tanking in ESO. If you cannot sustain, you cannot block, use skills, or perform your tank duties effectively. So some of the common sustain issues include a lack of stamina. Running out of stamina means you cannot block, leading to increased damage intake and potential death. You've also got magicka burnout, so using many magicka based skills without proper recovery leads to being unable to heal or use defensive abilities after taking a big hit. And then cooldown management. Refreshing skills too early uses resources unnecessarily when the skill and its effects are still active, leading to wasted resources. One of the main reasons why tanks die is due to sustain issues. It might appear that more healing is needed or a mechanic was mishandled, but often the root cause is running out of resources, leading to an inability to block or heal effectively. So we've got quite a few different sustain methods that you can utilize to make sure that you're able to maintain all of your resources. Number one is heavy after a heavy. Heavy attacking is crucial for sustain. Always time your heavy attack immediately after a boss's heavy attack. The reason why you do this is because a boss will very rarely ever do back-to-back heavy attacks, and this means there is a window of opportunity for you to do a heavy attack and to regenerate some of your resources. Number 2, block less. So blocking constantly drains stamina. Learn fights to know when it's safe to drop block. Having high resistances, damage mitigation, and healing from a healer can make this considerably easier. Using potions, so use them frequently for resource recovery. Just always make sure you're using some kind of potion. Utilize synergies for gaining resources, especially orbs and shards. Every time you use any synergy, the Undaunted Command passive will provide resources for every synergy that's used. If you're also using Harmony Jewelry, that will give you an increased boost when using synergies. Lower your block cost, so use Bracing Enchants. You can also do things like slot in Defensive Stance or use Tireless Guardian champion points, wearing some medium armor pieces. All of these things will reduce your stamina cost for blocking, which will ease your overall sustain. Skills and passives. So many skills and passives will aid in sustain. Refer to my specific tank builds for comprehensive lists of useful skills and passives, but in general, you want to make sure that you're gaining some kind of access to these, especially if you are struggling for sustain, so that you're able to get those benefits. Don't overcast abilities. So avoid recasting abilities too soon. Let them run their full duration to conserve resources. Increase Magicka recovery. Having higher Magicka recovery helps sustain most of your tank abilities, so make sure you've got as much of it as you can get. Use your ultimate if you're a Dragon Knight. So frequent use of Warhorn in group content will boost your group's DPS, but it will also restore all of your resources. Use sustain gear. Start with sustain focused gear while you are learning and new to the game. Something like the Engine Guardian monster set is highly recommended because it is very, very good and will just give you resources very often. Jewelry traits. Harmony Jewelry greatly improves sustain with synergy rich groups. If Harmony isn't viable, Infused is the next best option. And then we've got Jewelry Enchants. Use Magicka Recovery Enchants for casting abilities, or try Focus Cost Reduction for frequent stamina abilities. Ensure that you've got enough recovery though to support cost reduction if you use that. Gear traits. Divine's Gear will buff your Mundus Stone, which is usually the Atronach, and give you extra recovery. Food and drink. Use food and drinks with recovery, especially Magicka recovery. Note that this may lower your max stamina and max Magicka, however. Buffs. Utilize skills that provide minor intellect, fortitude and endurance. Potions can offer the major versions of those buffs, but anything that will add additional sustain is useful. Slottable sustain. So slot any support skills, especially Barrier, alongside the Magicka Aid passive for a huge Magicka recovery boost. Arcanists can use Gibbering Shield for an additional recovery benefit from their Wellspring of the Abyss passive. And finally we've got Scribing. All classes can use a spammable Magicka skill that returns stamina. For example, Wield Soul with the signature script Druid's Resurgence restores 1000 Magicka and 1000 stamina. Stack Magicka recovery and use Wield Soul to sustain blocking more easily. By implementing these strategies and tips, you can maintain optimal resource sustain, ensuring that you can perform all of your necessary tank duties. Buffing and debuffing are among the most critical responsibilities you'll have as a tank. Once you are comfortable with maintaining aggro, positioning, sustaining and surviving, you can start to focus on these advanced techniques. Effective use of buffs and debuffs can provide significant boosts to your group and make you an invaluable tank. There's a wide list of different things that are useful. Anything that improves damage, sustain, recovery, ultimate, anything like those kinds of things is going to be useful. Anything that reduces incoming damage is also going to be useful. That reduces AoE damage, it reduces incoming damage of any kind, and then debuffs that affect the enemy with them taking increased damage or doing reduced damage are also always going to be really, really good. In terms of debuffs, there's also armor shreds which remove armor from the boss. These are also very strong debuffs. There's also a wide range of class specific buffs and debuffs which will depend on your class, and these are all listed on my website. When it comes to things like pre-buffing, before you engage in combat, always pre-buff with abilities that you can, like Major and Minor Resolve to increase resistances and mitigate some initial hits from the boss. You can pre-cast skills like Blood Altar for area healing if you're using it, for delayed spawning bosses where they kind of appear or drop down. You can set up Elemental Blockade, Razor Caltrops and other AoE abilities in the spawn area to start applying effects immediately once the fight begins. Now we're going to look at some strategies for how to tank, starting with tanking ad pulls. In the Elder Scrolls Online, AoE taunting isn't an option, so the main focus during ad pulls is on crowd controlling rather than taunting. Understanding how different effects interact is crucial for effective ad management. Ad pulls typically consist of regular enemies that can be pulled or chained together and then controlled with snares and immobilization. Using the Void Bash set, which is from Vatashran Hollows, can significantly improve this process, pulling enemies within 12 meters with one button press, leaving only a few to manually be chained. So some of the key points. Number 1, chaining and pulling skills are important during ad pulls to stack enemies and gather them together onto one spot. Snaring is another important aspect which reduces the enemy's movement speed. And then you've got immobilizations, which hold the enemy in place for a period of time. Stuns and fears are ineffective on recently chained and pulled enemies, so generally not that useful for tanking. The scribing system does provide immobilization skills for all classes who don't have the built-in options. So a general ad pull rotation would include scanning the area for elite enemies. So you want to identify elite enemies that need to be immediately taunted, and especially look around for any two-handed enemies as well. Initiate combat. Start that with an elemental blockade to cause the enemies to start running towards you. Place down razor caltrops on the ground in front of the enemy, and you want to have this in the path that they will walk towards the group. This snares the enemies, slowing them down and debuffing them with major breach. Use Power Slam to proc the Void Bash set, or chain and pull enemies. So you want to gather them in a stack on top of the caltrops and the blockade. Void Bash will also apply Major Maim if using it. Once you've done that, you then want to immobilize enemies. So use your immobilization skill to keep them rooted in the stack. After that, you want to apply some debuffs such as Pulsar with your Frost Staff. Do that twice while enemies are inside the blockade to apply Minor Breach, Minor Maim, Minor Brittle, Minor Protection, and Minor Mangle. You taunt any remaining enemies that aren't dead because they're going to start to run off and attack your group. By following this rotation, you can effectively control and manage ad pulls, making it easier for damage dealers to quickly eliminate grouped enemies while applying strong debuffs to them as well. This strategy really gives you really good overall efficiency and survivability of your group, and can be executed by any class as long as you've got the correct skills and scribing abilities. Tanking bosses is very different, so boss fights in ESO vary greatly, so it's challenging to provide a one-size-fits-all kind of strategy. However, understanding and adapting to general principles and specific mechanics will significantly improve your tanking performance. Here are some detailed guidelines to help you tank effectively during boss encounters. So firstly, some general rules. Number 1, taunt management. You've got to maintain taunt on bosses by reapplying every 14 seconds to ensure you hold aggro. Number 2, positioning. Turn bosses away from your group to prevent them from hitting allies with frontal attacks. Avoid moving bosses unnecessarily to maximize your group's damage output. Then it's just about the fundamentals of keeping taunt, blocking, sustaining, and surviving as your top priority. You've got to maintain good boss observation. Watch for interruptible attacks, channels, mechanics, and effects. And then just mitigate damage. Roll dodge heavy attacks. Block hits to avoid taking full damage. And then when we look at common boss mechanics, there's a few things we can really look for that we know are going to happen. So firstly, we've got heavy attacks. So to deal with these, you block or dodge to avoid significant damage. We've also got a lot of bosses that come with adds, chaining the adds into the boss, and maintain control of the fight area. You've got light attacks. These can be blocked, absorb with the damage shield, or sometimes you can just ignore them and take them unblocked. AoE attacks. These are things that appear on the ground, and it'll either be a big thing that you need to move out of, or it'll be a permanent circle on the ground. It's usually pretty clear, but you need to just move out of these. For a tank, it's not as critical to get out immediately. Some things will hit more if you stood in them and they will explode. Other things, just move out of these quickly to avoid damage. Dot attacks, or also known as damage over time. These require healing over time and good mitigation. This is just an effect that will be applied to your character, and you need to heal through it and try and stay alive. Projectile attacks. These are things that will shoot at you from various different enemies. You can use a shield skill or block to mitigate the damage from these. Interruptible attacks. All you've got to do is look for the interruptible visual and then just bash the enemy to stop this from happening. Negative effects. Some bosses will apply negative effects to your character. You can sometimes purge these, so purge them if possible, or if not, they may just be like a heal check mechanic. Fear mechanics. So sometimes you have this mechanic where you need to avoid looking at the boss to prevent being feared at a specific time. Another mechanic might be persistent AoEs. So sometimes you have AoEs that are dropped on the floor or cover a certain area of the ground. Move out of these and reposition the boss if necessary. Some bosses will have hide mechanics, so you have to hide behind a pillar or a wall or other objects as required so that you don't get killed by the main attack. Some bosses will have a kite mechanic where you've got to move around to avoid being hit by the thing that is chasing after you. Some bosses will do a multi-hit or quick swipe attack. Just ensure that you've got enough stamina to block or dodge roll it, but do be careful on multi-attacks when you dodge, because when you end the dodge roll animation, you might get hit and that might kill you. Some bosses will have debuff mechanics, which will cause some kind of effect that will debuff you and increase the damage that you take. You've just got to use your survival techniques to try and mitigate that damage and try to stay alive. Some bosses will do an avoid group member mechanic, so you've got to move away from allies that are affected by beams or AoEs or things that are around their feet that will spread to you, so just avoid those to avoid gaining any additional damage. There's sometimes also heal check mechanics, where you've got to prepare for heavy incoming damage in a very short space of time, and it requires significant healing. You can help with that even if you've got a healer by casting skills and damage shields and things that will give you buffs to improve your incoming healing.
Some bosses have anti-dodge roll mechanics. If you dodge, you kill or knock back your group, or cause the enemy to become enraged, which means they will inflict more damage.
There's a couple of trial mechanics as well that you might see, including boss swapping mechanics. So this is where you've got to coordinate with your off tank to switch bosses at a specific time. And then another one is a portal mechanic, which is trials as well, usually where you've got to enter some kind of portal and handle the mechanics inside. Sometimes that requires a tank. So there isn't really any way to test your capabilities as a tank other than just doing content and practicing, and doing so in a comfortable environment with people that you know. The easiest ways to kind of do some tests include Asylum Sanctorium. You can travel into Asylum Sanctorium trial on normal or vet, head to the main boss, St. Olms, press the two buttons on the left and right to activate the +2 version. If you bring a friend with you, they can kite the lightning pools that St. Olms spits at you. Without that, they will land underneath you. The benefit of this is it allows you to practice maintaining your buffs and your debuffs while dealing with heavy damage from a trial boss in a fairly challenging environment, but it's easy to get to and very accessible, so it's something you can practice. Aside from that, going into Black Rose Prison, running into the entrance of a trial and dealing with ad pulls and things there is something you can go and run and do to practice. It's quite hard as a tank because there isn't any way to do it like a damage dealer where they can pass on a trial dummy. You do have to do content to practice. So when we look at tanking content and progression, with all the fundamental information that we've provided already, you now have the kind of basics of tanking. It's time to dive into some actual content and put your skills to the test. There is a list of things that you can do to begin practicing tanking to help you build up confidence and experience before tackling the more challenging encounters. So at any level you can start doing normal dungeons and random normal dungeons as well. I say any level, but you will need level 10 to use the queue for this. With all the fundamental information we've provided, you now have the basics of tanking. Start with normal dungeons, as these are easy enough to be completed without a dedicated tank. This makes them ideal for familiarising yourself with dungeon layouts, getting used to your character and the basic tanking mechanics. While you won't get the full tanking experience, use this opportunity to farm useful tank gear, focusing on the gear sets listed in our tank gear guide. Some of the dungeons to look out for if you don't have access to any DLCs: Crypto Hearts and Vaults of Madness will unlock a couple of good options for gear sets, including Ebon and Worm. Look out for dungeons like Black Drake Villa for Drake's Rush, the Dread Cellar for Crimson Oath's Rive, Shipwright's Regret for Turning Tide, and even something like Graven Deep for Pangrit Den Mother. After that, you can move on to non-DLC veteran dungeons and your Undaunted pledges from about champion point 160 plus. After mastering normal dungeons, you can move on to veteran dungeons, and you want to start with the non-DLC ones. These dungeons are more challenging than their normal counterparts, but still very manageable, allowing you to practice proper tanking techniques and apply many concepts from this guide. The difficulty is slightly higher, providing a better tanking experience, and you'll need to begin understanding and following mechanics, especially in boss fights. This helps build good habits and improve your tanking skills. There is plenty of room for error and recovery, offering a forgiving environment to learn. Completing veteran dungeons allows you to earn extra keys from the Undaunted pledges, important for obtaining shoulder pieces for monster sets. Additionally, you'll earn useful monster helmets by completing veteran dungeons, essential for your tank build. Progressing through these veteran dungeons will enhance your tanking skills and prepare you for more challenging content. So some of the base game dungeons are Fungal Grotto, Spindle Clutch, Banished Cells, Dark Shade, Elden Hollow, Wayrest, Crypto Hearts. Those kind of dungeons that are base game dungeons will be easy to complete on veteran with very little champion points and knowledge. Some of the veteran dungeons that you want to look out for the monster sets include Spindle Clutch 2 for Bloodspawn, Darkshade Caverns 2 for Engine Guardian, Volumfell for the Tremor Scale monster set, Blackdrake Villa for Encratis' Behemoth, Shipwright's Regret for Nazare, and then Earthenroot Enclave for Archdruid. At that point, you want to start looking towards things like Dragonstar Arena at CP 160+. DSA is a 4-player arena. While incredibly easy on normal, it is quite long. It's worth completing to farm a valuable weapon set that enhances healing and survival, making it a great investment for many builds. Ideally, you want to aim to try and do the veteran version if you can. If you've got a bit of experience in veteran dungeons, you've successfully tanked them, you're probably going to be capable of handling veteran DSA because this is aimed at quite low CP content. And the important loot from this would be the Puncture and Remedy set, the Master's One Hand and Shield. As well as that, you've also got Vatishran Hollows, the solo arena. So before tackling veteran DLC dungeons and harder content, it's wise to collect the very important Void Bash set from Vatishran Hollows. The downside is that this is a solo arena and it requires you to do some damage. But the plus side is you can utilise the Armory, which is a free housing item from the Crown Store. Place the Armory in your house to switch your entire build to a more damage focused setup, allowing you to complete Vatishran Hollows on normal. You do need to have around 10k DPS to do this successfully. If you're an Arcanist or Dragon Knight, you can use my hybrid tank builds to do this content quite easily. The Void Bash set is one of the best for dungeon tanking, enabling you to pull in a whole stack of adds with one button while also debuffing them. This makes ad pulls faster, easier, and more sustainable, benefiting both you and your group. Once you've gathered all this kind of experience, you can start looking at doing normal trials from around champion point 300. At this stage, your priority is to apply the fundamentals you've learned into a trial setting. Starting with normal trials is generally fine, though newer trials can be more challenging due to complex mechanics. Many mechanics in normal trials can be ignored though, without severe consequences, unlike in the veteran trials. This makes normal trials an excellent learning opportunity, but it can be a good idea to read some of the guides and clips so you've got an idea of what to look out for, even if they won't be impacting you in the normal version. Joining guild runs is ideal for learning as they offer a supportive environment where you can ask questions and gather feedback without facing potential toxicity. Look for guilds that regularly organise trial runs. Guild runs provide a structured setting where you can gain valuable insight and advice from experienced players, which is crucial for your development, especially as a tank. If you opt for random trial runs, you can find groups by travelling to Craglawn using a text chat, or there is a grouping tool in the social menu as well. Be aware that random runs can be volatile and critical, with mistakes often met with criticism rather than support, as these runs are typically focused on gear farming. However, if you have some trial experience and knowledge, random runs can be a viable option. They can offer a variety of experiences and are used mostly for obtaining various different gear. Not all trials require 2 tanks, but joining those that do can help you understand how to split the workload with another tank, reducing the risk to the group if you make a mistake. Learn to coordinate with another tank is essential for handling more complex mechanics and ensuring smoother progression. Pay attention to trial mechanics to try and pick up as much information as possible, as this is crucial for transitioning into veteran trials where ignoring mechanics can lead to failure, and there is a massive jump up in difficulty from normal to veteran. Some of the trials you want to look out for at this phase are Sunspire for the Claw of Yolnahkrin set, Lucent Citadel for the Lucent Echoes gear set, Dreadsail Reef for Pearlescent Ward, Rockgrove for Saxhill Champion, and Cloudrest for the Vestment of Olorim set. And finally, we've got tanking endgame content. There is no rush to reaching the endgame of ESO. This content represents the hardest challenges in the game, often requiring weeks or months of progression and practice to complete. It can also take time to find a team willing to commit to doing these trials. Endgame content can be seen as sort of veteran hard mode DLC dungeons, veteran trials, hard mode trials, and trifectas, which is when you do veteran dungeons or trials completed with no death, hard mode enabled, and within the speedrun time limit. Reaching this level involves a long journey where you need to complete each dungeon and trial initially on veteran, learning all of the mechanics along the way. Ideally, you should do this with friends or guild members for better coordination and support. With dungeon content, it's much more accessible since it's easier to find 3 other players interested in hard modes and trifectas. Some DLC dungeon hard modes are extremely challenging, with high damage and multiple mechanics, making them excellent preparation for moving on to veteran hard mode trials. With Veteran Hard Mode Trials, when you are fully aware of mechanics from the Veteran version and comfortable with tanking, you have all of the gear and skills required, you can start searching for groups that are recruiting tanks for Hard Mode. Learning these mechanics in a supportive environment with a raid leader guiding you through tasks and differences helps you progress. Multiple attempts will likely be needed, providing valuable knowledge and practice. When you move on to Trifecta Tanking, once you gain hard mode completions and experience, you can move on to Trifecta Tanking, where you're expected to know everything the hard mode throws at you and execute it perfectly. Endgame content requires advanced knowledge and often necessitates carrying multiple gear sets, swapping gear and skills between fights, and fully optimizing your setup for specific trials, dungeons, and even specific bosses. You may also need to use alternative classes to fill any gaps in the group's needs to be optimal. This level of content is challenging, but extremely rewarding, requiring a lot of time, patience, and knowledge to master. There are some easier DLC dungeons that you can do at lower CP, like Imperial City Prison, White Gold Tower, Cradle of Shadows, Ruins of Mazatun, The Cauldron, Black Drake Villa. Some of the older DLC ones, those are the easier ones. You will need sort of 600 CP plus for some of the more tricky ones like Coral Airy, Shipwright's Regret, Graven Deep, Stone Garden. More so the newer dungeons will require a higher CP level. For Veteran Trials, from 600 CP plus you can do some of the easier ones like Ethereal Archive, Hellra, Sanctum Ophidia, even Asylum Sanctorium and Sunspire. Ideally you want to have 1000 plus CP for more of Lorcash, Halls of Fabrications, and then the more tricky ones like Kind's Aegis, Cloud Rest, Sanity's Edge, Lucent Citadel, Rockgrove and Dreadsail Reef. For the hard mode trials, you do want to have 1500 plus champion points and you need to be very well prepared for this content with the correct gear, the skills, the classes and everything that you need that we've discussed already. And these hard mode trials do vary in difficulty, so Sanctum Ophidia being one of the easiest ones, and they just get progressively harder. And that is the end of this guide. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me go over all of this information. Just remember that the tank role is a difficult and pressured role to play. We all progress at different speeds, and you just need to develop as you gain experience and try your best. Play the game, play your class, learn the role, learn from your mistakes, and gain as much experience as you can. Learning fights and mechanics will make things so much easier, and you can only do this by getting many hours of experience and talking and playing alongside other tanks. If you've got any questions, please let me know in the comments below, or let me know in the Tank Club Discord, and we'll try our best to help you progress as well. A huge thank you to all of our patrons, subscribers, and YouTube members for their support. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.